Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is July 10th, 2025. My name is Kate Barlow, and I am the host of today's OT Echo. We have Dr. Farzaneh Yazdani here to talk about her model of occupational wellness. I am so excited that she's here to volunteer her time. And thank you all for your commitment to occupational therapy and for continuous education and really helping our profession on a global scale here. We are going to ask that you keep yourselves on mute today and then hold all questions until the end. Dr. Yazdani is going to speak for the first 30 minutes, and then she'll take questions, and then we'll do our case study. We'll break out into breakout rooms, and then we'll all come back at the end to discuss our findings for the case study. So again, thank you all for joining us. Please, Dr. Yazdani, take it away.
Thank you so much. So as you can see, I put the title Occupational Balance to Occupational Wholeness just to show the journey, even though we are going to only talk about occupational wholeness today. So there is a little bit of a background. I'm not going to spend too much time on the background and research part of it, which was years and years that took me to come to the point that I could really say that, yes, I have come up with a model in here. So I started with understanding what occupational balance is. And as you know, a lot of time it is said that a good research is the one that starts with a genuine question. And it was genuine for me because I was told I don't have balance. So I was just trying to see what it means to have occupational balance. And interestingly enough, I came up with a lot of, different answers when I studied that, not only within the literature, but also when I was interviewing occupational therapists, that I started with them because I thought they are in front line of claiming this concept, occupational balance. So we started with the word balance, and is it a quantity? Is it related to time, energy spent on occupation? What is really a balance? As you can see, it can be seen in many different ways. So that was one thing that I really wanted to do, to know, and a lot of answers were showing me there is no consensus as to what people mean by balance, and also about the word occupation itself. Again, are you talking about different aspects of occupation, the way it is defined by AOTA, or some people were talking about must do, want to, need to, balancing these kind of things, or balancing roles, balancing restful and serious things. So even the word occupation, again, was used very differently, not just in literature, but by people as well. So it was 2017 that first I published this paper, just to introduce the model. And since then, a lot of work happened. And what I'm presenting to you is a little bit further down the line of my work. When 2023, I published the book, and you may have seen the book, or you may see it in future, that every concept that I have explained in the book, it is followed by an example, that most of the examples are real scenarios. So I start with some of the basic concepts. That half an hour is really so brief, so this is really just an introduction, particularly because it's a very philosophical model. It is different from other models that somehow, in spite of these differences, they have similarities in the way they address, for example, occupational performance, function, etc., participation. So even though the models are different, but when you look at different models, you will see they are addressing similar things in some way. But this is more of an occupational sciencey language, and it is much more philosophical. So that for that reason, it suddenly takes you to another world that might be a little bit more complicated and takes time. to get used to it. So the core of the model is based on the concept of occupational wholeness that I'm going soon to define what it means. And the sense of wellness arises when people can meet their needs for being, belonging, and becoming through what they do or not do. Straight away, you can see that I'm introducing something different here, and it is emphasizing on the concept of not doing as well, which is in this model equally important as doing. So people feel well integrated, according to this model, content and whole if they perceive it positively meaningful. The second point of difference with the literature, that I'm not just talking about meaningfulness, but I talk about positively meaningfulness, because things could be meaningfully negative for you, and then they can have different impact on the way you are encouraged or discouraged to do something. So people feel well integrated, content, and whole if they perceive a positively meaningful combination of what they do or not do in order to meet their needs for being, belonging, and becoming. And again, I bring belonging before becoming, because I feel that somehow it starts, the belonging, meeting belonging needs starts before becoming. We still, exploring that concept further, but so far, this is what we are thinking of. So being in this model is who we understand ourselves to be at present. So the significance of the time is very important in differentiating different aspects of being, belonging, and becoming. So when we talk about being, we are talking about right now, present. And this present can be defined within your, frame of mind. For example, today, this week, or this month. Mostly, when we talk about being, we talk a period of time that situation has been similar and stayed the same for us. So being, and then as you can see, I called being and belonging and becoming needs, and doing is not in line with them in this model. Doing is an intermediate need to meet being, belonging, becoming needs. So it's not in the same line with them. So being needs are the ones that help a person to survive self-care physically and mentally. And also, if we go a little bit, you will see that the extension of being is fulfilling the sense of control, meeting our needs for autonomy, choice making, meaning making. These are all part of the being. So belonging is an extension of being. Again, you will see that I present these concepts as a triangle. So while we talk about them separately, but in reality, they are linked together as well, just like the three sides of a triangle that they link together. So belonging is an extension of being that develops the person further in terms of having a relationship and affiliation to things, places, other people. And you will see that again further, I talk about ideas even. So this belonging is not just related to another person. And we will see that again in details. Unfortunately, I don't have time to discuss it today, but I briefly mentioned belonging, according to our research, has three levels: togetherness, relatedness, and connectedness. And this can be reciprocal or reciprocating between one person to another, or can be one-sided. So again, as you can see, there are much more into sense of belonging that needs to be met. Then we have becoming, and becoming is an extension of being when human needs for autonomy and competence are developed further. So with our being, we start sense of autonomy and competence, but when it is becoming dominant in us to meet those needs, we call it becoming. So becoming is a dynamic process that moves human beyond the presence. So the elements of hope, the elements of aspiration, the elements of future and planning are part of this needs for meeting becoming needs. So you can see here that we are talking about a lot of relationship among these concepts. As you can see, they are considered in a context. I don't call it environment. I called it context because I wanted to include the concept of time in it as well, because the context of a person, even with the similar so-called similar environment, now and 10 minutes later could be different. And the context, therefore, is very important. And this triangle, which is hypothetically, drawn, is in that context. So the context has impact on all these elements. And you can see the doing is in the middle. Again, you can see I call it doings because it includes what we intentionally do and what we intentionally decide not to do, because they are equally important for our being. For example, when we decide not to smoke certain drugs, then we are thinking about, we are decision making, and it has impact on our being, belonging, becoming. You can see there is a relationship between being and belonging, again, belonging and becoming, and being and becoming. And these are all equally important when we talk about our sense of wholeness, and also the way we do things can have impact on all these elements as well. So, according to the model, where we have a theoretical triangle that I already showed it to you, which means that I just draw it in order to show the relationship between these elements. But every individual has an actual situation. It means that I can identify my doings that can meet the needs for being, belonging, and becoming. And later you can see again that that can be, for example, a squared. And I can say that, well, I can, through things that I do or not do at the moment, I can say from 0 to 10, for example, or 0 to -10, I can score myself 6. It means that what I actually do can identify a triangle for me. And what ideally I would have done if within a certain period of time I had the opportunity and facilities, I would have done differently, and that would be my ideal. So therefore, uh, one of the concepts in this model, one of the principles is that the more your actual doings in meeting your needs of being, belonging, and becoming, and your ideal uh, triangle are congruent, therefore you can say that you have a better sense of wholeness. Remember that wholeness is not something that we achieve and that's it. It's not static, it's dynamic, and throughout our life, as life changes, our sense of wholeness constantly changes as well. And the point of looking into our sense of wholeness, is the time that some changes happen, either in environment, in circumstances, in our health. So whatever is that point, then afterwards it is expected that we look our actual and ideal triangle again. So as you can see here, for example, this is a simplified example of, one of the triangles could be considered as ideal, and one of the triangles could be considered as actual, and you can see a gap between them. This is even triangle, but in reality, it might not be even. For example, you might meet your needs of being more than your needs of belonging. For example, we say before children, before going to, or students, before going to university, here in the UK is the case. I don't know if it is the same in America or other countries, but suddenly they intensively get engaged a lot with a lot of studying to have good marks. So they spend much more time, their doings is much more to meet their needs for becoming, which is for the future plan, for the exam time and getting into the university or course they want. So sometimes they have less social gathering, during the last year or 2 years of their study, their what they do to meet their belonging needs is much more limited, and sometimes even their being, their self-care even, for example, might have lower scores. So the triangle might look much more different. Look at this triangle, for example, here. You can see a triangle, and if we say that the red one is a triangle, actual triangle, which is how the person is doing in meeting their needs, and then the orange triangle is their ideal, the way they wanted or they wished they could have done. It creates the other triangle, and then you see that how far away they are from each other. How what a big gap is there, while in the right side, for example, you can see they have a lot of overlap with each other. So the more overlap they have, it means that the person is potentially more content with the situation. It means what they do to meet their needs and what there has been their ideal are very close to each other. We will discuss, of course, that it's not just about the gap, it's about the meaning they give to the gap as well. So, for example, a child who is putting a lot of effort for the university, but this is based on what they want, because it has meaningful to put too much effort for preparing themselves for the university, and having less social gathering with their peers, etc., but because it's what they want and it has meaning to them. Therefore, even though the gap is big, but it has less impact on their health, particularly mental health. But imagine a child that, for example, is forced by parents to sit and study. So that doing that the person is, doing, or the triangle is skewed towards becoming, because they have to do a lot of their doings towards becoming, less socializing, less, practicing their choice making, etc. This triangle is deviated, and also the meaning of that for the child could be, for example, I hate it because I have no control over it. It's just the torture. When they could define it as a torture for themselves, mean it as a torture for themselves, the gap has much more negative impact on the person. So what we are saying is that one identifier of the um, unhealthy, let's say, situation, or something that is for us meaningful to address, is when not only there is a gap, but also the gap has negative meaning for the person. So here we come to the identifier of the problems. Many people ask me, Farzaneh, when this model can be used, for which population, how we can use it. And I would say that, see, first of all, the key is if the person feels unhappy either with themselves or with their life. And this happens, for example, let's say simply after a stroke, the person identifies, I cannot do the same things I used to do, etc., etc. So they might have incongruence between what actually they can do now after their limitation and what it would have been their ideal. So there is this incongruence, and that is linked to lack of satisfaction, for me, means that more could apply. Therefore, also attribution of the negative or positive meaning to this incongruence or congruence also has impact here as identifier a problem. Because, for example, a lot of us, and that's the in our life, a lot of times our triangle is skewed towards something, and that's life. Sometimes we spend, particularly across lifespan, in a certain age, we might spend much more time towards our belonging, less towards becoming, or doing much more towards being, less meeting our needs for belonging, etc., etc. But it's okay, because I link that to the way my life is should be now. For example, imagine parenting. that a lot of things that, when you are parenting, a lot of things that you do is towards the belonging and being, taking care of yourself and your child. And a lot of people might, pose they're becoming to, in a way that they are not doing much for the future. Let's say they are very much focused on the present, being a parent. So, but it is meaningful. They like it, they love it, they enjoy it. So it is okay if it is the case. But imagine if somebody didn't want to have a child and suddenly have a child, and what they do, they don't like it. So the meaning of that is very negative, that is skew. And of course, the impact of that on the person is negative as well. So not only, therefore, the incongruence matters, the meaning of that matters, the degree of incongruence matters. So sometimes if it is not only it has negative meaning, but it's a very big incongruence. It's just too far from what I love to do and what I am doing. And persistence of incongruence is important. Even if you give a meaning, for example, as a mother, even if you give meaning to your parenthood, there is a time that you really want your children to go and do things independently, and you have much more time and go back to things that you want to do for the sake of, for example, your becoming. So long term and persistence incongruence, even with positive meaning, could have negative impact on the person. And the last thing, which is very important, is harmony. Harmony relates to what we do and between to meet our needs for being, belonging, and becoming. That's very important, because sometimes, for example, you may do something for the sense of your being and belonging, and it's congruent with your becoming as well. I sometimes give example of, in a world that men, for example, are very much encouraged and respected for what they do. So through what they do and the job they have in the society, in community, and in paid job, unpaid job, they may meet a lot of their belonging and being needs as well. But for women, so a lot of times what they do for their becoming, it feels as if it contradicts with their belonging, as if they are losing their place in the home. Oh, you're a mother and you spend too much time outside. So this lack of harmony between what they do can cause trouble, as it does, as in a real world. And one of them is that because of the meaning given to what women do for their being, belonging, and becoming. So there is a lack of harmony, and that lack of harmony can cause trouble for them. So the key element of the intervention in MO, again, I'm talking very briefly about each one of them, is the interaction. Again, not many OT models talk about client-centeredness, but Mo talks about therapist-client interaction as a center, because I believe that it's not just the client. Client could be a lot of things, but what happens between me and client is the one that I put my intervention. I wouldn't know my client based on who the person is. It's based on my interaction, which brings in how skillful I am in bringing things out of my client through my relationship and communication skills. So one of the elements of intervention, core of, let's say, intervention, is raising self-awareness, because a lot of us, we do things, but if it doesn't come to the level of awareness that how much it is meeting our needs, it wouldn't behave the same, and it wouldn't have the same impact if we are not aware of that. So the element of change or cope. So intervention is a change. And we know that we live in a context that a lot of things cannot change, neither in our capacities nor in the environment capacities. So while we talk about choice making in this model, we believe our choices are limited. We don't believe that we are our choice, just with no limitations. No, there is a limitation for our choices. I always say I'm an Iranian. I don't know whether I could change it or I decide it or I like it, but that's the way it is. It's a limitation from everybody's nationality. And you carry it with you. You have to live with it. You like it or you don't like it, and the consequences. So we have two elements here: empowering our clients and enabling the environment and context. These are very two umbrella terms as to how we put our intervention through. So here I can show you again something that I talked already about, the scoring. I use this scoring system in order to help people to be able to draw their triangles and visualize what we mean by meeting our needs, etc. So as you can see, there is a negative as well, because you may say that not only, I can give you an example of myself. Sometimes when I was doing my PhD and I was living in another country, etc., I was so much damage in my being. I was not eating, I was living on coffee, not sleeping enough. So my doings not only was not meeting my needs, being needs of survival, but also even autonomy wise, I was feeling I have no choice. I was just me and my child. So I would give my doings, for example, a very negative score here. So the negative scores are available too, because you can do something that you think that is not meeting your needs. So we don't have much time. So in the next few minutes, I just want to show you a very brief example of working through a case study with somebody that had problem with the sense of belonging, just to show you that, if you work on one element according to system thinking, it has impact on the other, meeting and satisfying other needs as well. So for this model, you don't need to focus on all the elements of the model. You may find a person like the one that I show you here, second generation Portuguese British girl, who was very anxious and angry, actually, that she was thinking that she doesn't want to be seen only British, or only, let's say, she was not happy to be seen Portuguese, but she was feeling that her friends in college don't see her as British either. And you can see that in her painting, that was the word she used. The society compartmentalize us. It means that it puts us into colors. And just to cut this story short, I worked with her through a lot of sketches. We use reflection as a therapeutic strategy here. It's not just reflection for me. I educate my clients to reflect as well, as she did. And she was writing reflection, and we wrote the narrative together. And this is what we did. We started saying that, okay, let's see what helps you to meet your needs further, and particularly belonging needs. And then we came here to this final drawing that she started realizing after these 6 sessions of reflection, sketching and reflection, and rewriting narratives together, which is the main element of this model. She started understanding that you can create an identity, a sense of belonging for yourself that could be partially Portuguese, partially British. And that's, you can see in her drawing. And her hunger and anxiety went low, because she felt that she can have an integrated sense of belonging, meet it through choice making, what she likes from Portuguese, what she likes from British, etc. So that was an example I just wanted to show you. And as I said, these are the things that I already discussed, the significance of not doing as well as doing. And unfortunately, I think I don't have much more time, but you can look at the slides will be available to you. These are just examples to help you further with concepts of the model. So I think the last thing I would want to say is just that there is an Instagram. You can follow that, and soon we will be having also the website. We are working on it and in different languages, and we can you can find material on the websites too. Sorry, it was very rushed. It's very difficult to put a very conceptual model in half an hour, and particularly if you're the developer, because you know everything inside out about.
Well, thank you so much for that presentation. And we will go ahead if anyone has any questions, if you want to put them in the chat. And Dr. Yazdani, did you want to present the case study that you had sent about Louisa?
Oh, do you have it? I have it, but it is just, I have to bring it up. Sorry, I didn't bring it up. So let me see.
I'm pulling it up. It should be on the screen. Hopefully you can see it here. Do you want to still present it here with this
Yes,
visual?
okay. So as you can see here, if you make it bigger, please, that would be appreciated as well. Yeah. As you can see here, I just wanted you to practice, for example, Louisa that is returning home from hospital and after a stroke. So again, I just wanted to emphasize that the problem doesn't need to be a mental health problem to have dissatisfaction with yourself and your life. As a result of a stroke, you can see that she's experiencing significant physical limitations and also decrease in ability to do things at home, activities at home independently. She expresses a strong sense of loss regarding control. And this is what we said, perhaps sense of control, which is related to being. And overall, her life and decisions feels that, she cannot make it. This is how she feels. As you can see, this model emphasizes a lot on the subjective experience and perceived experience of the person and perception about themselves and their world as well. So her current circumstances has led to a reduced sense of autonomy and well-being. Louisa is particularly distressed by the restrictions imposed to her. And because previously she could enjoy social activities and she cannot, or she feels she cannot do that anymore. So she feels disconnected from her social life, particularly going out with her friends. And these are all what she thinks about her situation. Something that you may have seen on the title of the book is that based on Model of Occupational Wholeness, we think about doings, but when we want to make a change, we also look into the way the person think and feel as well, because sometimes it's not just changing the doing, but we need to change the way the person think about their doing and their situation as well, or feel about it as well. So that's why I'm emphasizing these are the things that at the moment Louisa thinks about her situation. So Louisa was in the midst of completing a master's degree, computer science at a university, and then suddenly she had a stroke. So the uncertainty surrounding her ability right now, because she doesn't know how much she improves. And people who have worked with a stroke, they know that the recovery has a lot of stages and etc. And she doesn't know exactly what is her new ability. And that's the turning point I mentioned before. After a change, you should sit down and start looking at the triangles and see what are the actual and what are the ideal situations if the person could have done something differently within a period of time. So as she transit to back home, Louisa is facing a critical adjustment period where emotional support, rehabilitation, and reassessment of her goals and capacities are required, because things have changed now for her. And a lot of people in this stage, they want to go back to their previous actual triangle, and we have to see what is the current actual triangle, what the person can do. So the questions I develop here and I would like you to discuss is, would Louisa be a good candidate for using the model of occupational wholeness? Why does it fit? I want you to think about it. And then based on what she's presenting of herself, can you conceptualize the gap between actual and ideal triangles of being, belonging, and becoming? So somehow in her narrative, she says that I cannot do this, I cannot do that. And again, as I said, this is what she thinks. And we respect that initially. But as an intervention, we might start negotiating and discussing and writing narrative differently. And the third question is, which aspect of her doing, thinking, or feeling would you focus on to improve her situation? So this is what I want, you may choose one of them or all of them.
Great. Thank you so much. Sarah is going to break you all into your separate rooms to discuss the case study, and then we'll all get back together as a group.
Hi there, welcome back. We hope that your discussion was fruitful. We also know this was certainly a new topic for the majority of people in the room, and thank you, Dr. Yazdani, for this work and for sharing. Let's use this time to debrief some of these questions. For a visual, I will go ahead and post these questions again to share the screen, and then welcome our dialogue as well. The first question, would Louisa be a good candidate for using this model? The answer is probably yes, of course, but why does it fit? Let's hear any input that you've had within your small groups. And I'll have our facilitators go ahead and chime in.
Adonis, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. So we talked about many changes in her life due to the stroke and for the new occupational dysfunctions that occurred. So we want her to depict her current situation and start thinking how she will build her future.
Thank you so much. Any other thoughts from the group around that question? It's a nice fit. This next question I take from, I'm going to move to the next question because I really want to also hear Dr. Yazdani's support for questions for this question number 2. So can you conceptualize the gap between the actual and ideal triangle of being, belonging, and becoming? Can I have any facilitators launch us here? And Dr. Yazdani, I'd love for you to provide your input here.
Sure.
Yeah, so in my group, like discussed, we tried to like put them in the triangle, like the being at the topmost and then having the belonging and becoming. So in our situation, the being would mean the pre-stroke lifestyle, that outing and all of that, the academics and that's what our capabilities were before the stroke. And then the belonging would mean the social lifestyles, going out with the friends and the support groups. And then becoming would mean our envisioned academic progress, which is now being compromised, and what needs to be done to get our back into back on track, like getting back to make progress. So that's what we discussed in that.
Yeah, that's great, actually. So if we imagine what she's saying from her, from the narrative, she's saying that, you can see a lot of negativism coming in, and a lot of confusion about what my actual situation is. So the actual situation is confused. Therefore, you have to discuss it with the person, as you said, potentially around the becoming, around the study, as you mentioned. But and also about the being, doing the day-to-day activities, etc. What would be probably a complicated thing to discuss is that the person ideals, and that ideals that also may need change as well. Therefore the person might say, I wish, maybe they present it like that, I could go back to the university again, I could do everything independently and all this stuff. And then we say, well, we know that it is not possible. So we give it a period of time. So let's see, for example, what would you think within the next month you would achieve? And then here is the similar to goal setting that we had with the person. So if in the traditional kind of OT practice, and if the person comes, and this is what we say, initially comes with an ideal triangle, as it is called, is too ideal, and there is a big gap between what you objectively can see as a therapist the person can do, or opposite, the person might be very disappointed and negative, and then you think that they can do much better. So your objective observation might be very different from what they say, yeah? But we just put what they think in both ideal and actual, and then you start negotiating with the person and come up with the third triangle, which I didn't mention it, and it's called tailored triangle, which is the triangle of intervention. Yeah. So, and that means if, for example, in this scenario, you would work as an OT to improve the capacities, the usual thing that you do, performance capacity, and you would work on the environment to facilitate the environment for whatever activities they want to do, but also to work on their mentality and cognition to understand that other people have been able, for example, after a stroke, after this stage, bring the evidence in to show them that they can have hope, that things may change. So as I said, using therapeutic strategies here are very important. So for example, we start with empathizing with her that, yes, we know that it is painful that you cannot do the same thing. But then we move into encouraging the person that, you see, you have managed so and so when you had challenges or difficulties before. And then collaboratively, you can draw a new narrative that is a tailored triangle with each other. So as you can see, again, it heavily relies, it's a coaching model, it's not therapeutic. But if we felt that it is, it heavily sits on the relationship you make and negotiating between you and dialogue between you and the person.
Thank you so much for that further clarification and validation. I'd love for us to pivot to one question in the chat instead of taking the final question of the case study because of time. And there was one question in the chat that said, how do we support a client who is born with an intellectual disability, who has not yet developed a sense, or maybe has had a challenge to developing a sense of belonging? And particularly whose sense of being is shaped by a mindset of I can't, right? Where it seems, their sense of belonging is static or very limited by current circumstances. We'll end with this question today. And while in that response, I also want to encourage those attending to also fill out our survey in order to receive your certificate. Why don't you close us here with that question?
Yeah. Okay. So let's say that when the person's being is sort of restricted by the image they have developed of themselves, therefore you can see that from the question, I am imagining a person that has thinks that has little control over their own situation and their own context or their life. I can see a person that potentially, for example, they feel that they cannot make choices, and their sense of autonomy cannot be fulfilled as well. So what I would say straight away is that if I want to make any change in the way the person thinks and imagine themselves, it's to facilitate environment with giving this person opportunity to do things within their capacities that we objectively observe and assess and evaluate, and therefore establish with constant feedback giving and raising awareness that, you see, you can do this, you see, you can do that. So we facilitate the environment, give them opportunity, ask them to make choices. We facilitate the environment in a way that the choices they make doesn't put them to the failure, but because we are OT, we assess their capacity. So by providing that and also constantly giving feedback and encouraging them to practice it, practice is a very strong element of this model as well, then we start changing the mentality of the person that I am a failure and I cannot have autonomy towards some things that I can. But this is us who is forming the environment for success rather than failure. And then the sense of belonging on its own, again, it's a very strong thing. The person definitely has things that feels connected or related to, but it's not in their level of awareness. Most of the time, we respond to things when things are work in negative way. If you take something from the person and the person wants to have it, it shows that the person feels some connection with that. Does that make sense? So we start, I think, with the belonging mostly is raising awareness. Who do you like to play with? Which book do you like, for example, to read? Which cup do you like to drink? And then we start establishing simple sense of belonging and relationship with things, with people, and with the environment for that person. And we bring that into their attention. The role of the helper here is just constantly reflecting all these things to the person, giving them feedback to bring that into their awareness, and then encourage them to reflect, and they start thinking, oh yes, instead of you giving feedback directly, asking them questions, and they say, yes, I actually feel I like to have it here. I actually feel, and that would create that sense of bring that sense of belonging into awareness.
I see such that role of occupational therapy and your passion and that therapeutic use of self, we call that, to really create that sense of belonging. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise, wisdom in this way. Thank you all for spending time with us today. Again, please fill out the surveys. I've also dropped Dr. Yazdani's email address in the chat box for any collaboration and questions to follow. In the meantime, we look forward to seeing you next month, and I hope that you have a lovely rest of July. Thank you,
Thank you so
everybody.
much.